Hey everyone, I'm Saurabh. In this video, I'm going to show you how to run your first D&D adventure as the Game Master, also known as the GM. Hopefully you've already watched my video about how to play D&D. If you haven't, there's a link in the description. That video explains how role-playing games work, the different dice, and the basic rules for combat. If you're feeling nervous, don't worry. Every Game Master starts somewhere, and the good news is you don't have to memorize every rule to play. I'm going to show you how to prepare for an adventure using the first adventure from my D&D campaign for kids, Wilds of Amaranth Part I, Save the Dog Kingdom. But even if you don't use this adventure, the same ideas apply to almost any published adventure. If you'd like to learn more about the book, there's a link in the description. Let's start by talking about what to do before the players arrive. One of the biggest mistakes new game masters make is trying to memorize the entire adventure. You don't need to do that. Instead, read through the adventure one time before your players arrive. You're not trying to remember every sentence. You're just trying to understand the big picture. Think about things like, what's the goal of the adventure? Where does the adventure start? How does it end? What creatures do the players encounter? What maps or handouts will you need? You'll also want to think about the major plot points. You don't need to memorize every conversation or every room the players will explore. You just need to know the overall flow for the adventure. For example, in this adventure, the players are going to meet Nala, learn that her dog is missing, search for clues, meet a goblin, and eventually explore a goblin cave. This book uses some easy-to-follow formatting to help you run the adventure. Everything in bold helps you find important information quickly. The text in green boxes is to be read or summarized for the players. The stat blocks are for you, not the players. The Game Master tips in yellow are reminders to help you run the adventure. These adventures include the creature stat blocks right on the adventure page. If the adventure you're running keeps the creature stat blocks elsewhere, just mark those pages with a sticky note or bookmark. Do the same thing for maps, puzzles, or anything else you'll need during the game. But don't worry about memorizing everything. You just need to know where to find it. Once you've read through the adventure, start setting up the table. If you're printing any maps or puzzles, you'll get all those ready. If you're using battle maps with miniatures or standees, make sure those are organized before anyone arrives. For this adventure, you could print a few things in advance. A map of the continent to give the players a sense of the world they're in, a map of the starting town of Hamilton, a map of the goblin encounter in the forest, a map of the campaign area, a map of the goblin cave, the door puzzle, the treasure chest puzzle, and standees for Nala, Eugene, the goblins, and the goblin chief. I know it sounds like a lot, but you don't have to print every map. If you'd rather let the players imagine the world, that's perfectly fine. The puzzles are the only things I definitely recommend printing if you're planning to use them. You should also make sure that everyone has dice, pencils, erasers, and character sheets before the adventure starts. It's much easier to spend a few minutes getting organized before the game than to stop the adventure later because someone can't find a pencil. And if you're playing with kids, gently remind them to go to the bathroom before starting. Once you're ready to set up, pick your spot at the table. I usually sit at the head of the table to take up a little extra space. I'll put my dice nearby, keep the adventure open to the first page, and have my bookmarks ready. If I'm using maps or miniatures, I'll keep them nearby, but I'll also keep them hidden from the players so nothing gets spoiled. If this is your first adventure with your group, decide whether the characters already know each other or if they're meeting for the first time. If the characters already know each other, let them introduce themselves. Have each player tell everyone their character's name, race, class, and one interesting fact about their character. This doesn't need to take very long. As they introduce themselves, write down those interesting facts. Those little details can become great story ideas later in the campaign. If the characters don't know each other, let the adventure introduce them naturally through its opening scenario. With all that in place, you'll start the adventure. Most published adventures include introductory text that's written specifically for the Game Master. You don't have to read it word for word. If reading it aloud helps you, that's perfectly fine. You can also summarize it in your own words. In this adventure, Nala is standing in the town square calling for help because her dog has disappeared. After you've described the opening scene, ask the players what they'd like to do. Maybe they walk over to Nala. Maybe they ask people nearby what's going on. Maybe they keep their distance and watch her for a while. Maybe they think of something you never expected. One of the biggest differences between a role-playing game and a video game is that players aren't limited to a list of options on a menu. They can try almost anything they can imagine. It is your job to describe the world, listen to what the players want to do, and describe how the world responds. Players may ask Nala questions about her past, how long she's had Eugene, or where she last saw him. The adventure already includes answers for these questions. When Nala responds, the players can make an insight check to see whether she's telling the truth. The players roll a d20 and add their insight modifier from their character sheet to try to meet or exceed the difficulty class listed in the adventure. If they succeed, they can identify that Nala is being sincere. If they roll really high, you might hint that Nala seems to know a little more than she's saying. That small hint foreshadows her truth about Eugene later. As a general rule, only ask for a roll when the outcome is uncertain or failure would make the story more interesting. There's lots of situations where players don't need to roll at all. For example, if the players ask Nala what happened to Eugene, you don't need a roll. She wants their help, so she'll simply tell them. You'll hear a lot of Game Master tips about using the phrase yes and. The idea is that you want to encourage the players to take an action that they want while advancing the story forward. However, it's also okay to say no but when appropriate. As odd as it may sound, I've had players say they want to just walk up to Nala and punch her in the face. I tell them no, then use but to redirect them to another possibility. Once the players accept the job and Nala asks everyone their names, Nala leads the newly formed party north of Hamilton toward the lake where she last saw Eugene. When they arrive, describe what they see. Tell them about the lake, describe the surrounding forest, then ask them what they'd like to do. If they aren't sure where to begin, Nala can encourage them to search for clues. The adventure describes a carved wooden toy hidden in the mud that the players can discover with a perception check. Eventually, the players notice what appear to be sets of dog prints in the mud leading north. After a short distance, the dog tracks disappear and are replaced by a new set of bipedal footprints heading deeper into the forest. At this point, most groups will naturally decide to follow the trail. After following the tracks for a few minutes, the players spot a goblin sitting on a large rock. He's carving a piece of wood, but the players can't quite make out what he's doing until they get a little closer. The players might sneak closer, walk up and talk to the goblin, try to scare the goblin, attack the goblin, or come up with something completely different. The adventure gives you several possibilities, but don't worry if the players think of something that isn't listed. As long as it makes sense, let them try it. If the players decide to sneak toward the goblin, they'll make stealth checks to see whether the goblin notices them. If they decide to talk instead, you get to roleplay as the goblin. A lot of new game masters get nervous about role-playing creatures and characters, but it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't need to use a funny voice or make up an accent. Just think about 3 simple questions to get started. What does this character know? What does this character want? And what is this character afraid of? In this case, you know the goblin is working for Evrak the Shadow. The goblin knows where Eugene is, but he's also afraid of making Evrak the Shadow angry. Thinking about the characters in this way helps you decide how the goblin responds to whatever the players say. If the players make a lot of noise or attack from a distance, the goblin might run away. In this case, the adventure already explains what happens next. Published adventures usually give you several options depending on what the players do, but you can make whatever adjustments you need. You'll also notice that Nala is traveling with a party. Characters like Nala are helpful because they can gently point the players in the right direction if they become stuck. She could suggest that the party search for tracks. She could remind the party about something they forgot. She could also encourage the party to keep exploring. But she shouldn't solve puzzles or defeat any monsters for the players. She should let the players be the heroes. Eventually, the players reach the Goblin Cave. Instead of placing the entire cave map on the table immediately, only reveal the areas the players have explored. And remember, not every character can see in the dark. Some races have dark vision, but others don't. Since the cave is dark, the party may decide to light a torch or lantern before continuing. The cave has 3 different tunnels. Only describe a tunnel after the players decide to explore it. If they ask what's down another tunnel, it's perfectly okay to say, you can't tell from where you're standing. This is also a good time to introduce one of the oldest pieces of advice in D&D. Don't split the party. If half the group goes left while the other half goes right, you'll have to keep switching back and forth between 2 separate groups. It also means that some players spend more time waiting than actually playing. Nala can encourage the party to stick together whenever possible. The players eventually reach a magical door puzzle. When the players encounter a puzzle, give them time to think and discuss different ideas. If the players become frustrated or stop making progress, that's a great time to have Nala offer a little suggestion. You don't want her solving the puzzle, you just want her helping the players to keep things moving. Every group enjoys D&D differently. Some groups love combat. Others enjoy role-playing. Others like solving puzzles more than anything else. As the game master, it's perfectly okay to adjust the adventure to match what your players enjoy. D&D isn't about being right or wrong. It's about everyone having fun together. Behind the puzzle door is another 3-way split. The tunnel on the left leads to the Goblin Chief's bedroom. Inside is a treasure chest tucked into a corner. This is a great opportunity to teach another classic D&D lesson. Always check for traps. The middle tunnel leads to the final encounter with the Goblin Chief and several other goblins. Unless the players fought the goblin earlier, this will probably be your first full battle as a game master. For new groups, I recommend simplifying initiative. Instead of having everyone roll to determine who goes first, I suggest you start with the player on your left and continue clockwise around the table. This way, everyone knows exactly whose turn is next, and it keeps combat moving. Once your group becomes more comfortable, you can start using standard initiative if you want. If you've watched the previous video about how to play D&D, you already know what players can generally do on their turns. Most turns include an option for both a movement and an action. That action might be attacking with a weapon, casting a spell, healing another player, or doing something creative that fits the situation. When players describe something unexpectedly, don't immediately say no. Instead, think, would this reasonably work? If the answer is yes, let them try it. When it's the goblin's turn, you'll use their stat blocks. Monster stat blocks work a lot like character sheets. They tell you the creature's armor class, hit points, attacks, movement, and any special abilities. During combat, just follow the same pattern as the players. Describe what the goblin does, roll the dice, decide the result, then move on to the next turn. One piece of advice I give new game masters is not to stop the game every time you can't remember a rule. If you're not sure, make a reasonable decision, keep the adventure moving, and look up the rule after the session. Your players will have much more fun playing the game than watching you search through a rulebook for 5 minutes. Keeping the story moving is almost always the better choice. Even though combat is the most likely scenario, it isn't the only one. Maybe the players try to negotiate. Maybe they offer the goblins treasure. Maybe they try intimidating the goblins. The dice and your decisions as the game master determine what happens next. After the players deal with the goblins, there's one final optional puzzle to unlock Eugene's cage. Like the earlier door puzzle, give the players time to work together before offering any hints. After rescuing Eugene, Nala tells the players the full truth. Eugene isn't just a lost dog. He's actually the prince of the dog kingdom. Nala also explains that the kingdom is threatened by the wizard Evrak the Shadow and asks the players to join her on a much larger quest. Before the players leave, Nala gives them a map of the surrounding area. Throughout the rest of the campaign, the map helps guide the players from one adventure to the next. Before ending this session, make sure the players record everything they picked up during the adventure. As you wrap up your first game, ask the players a few questions. What was your favorite part of the adventure? Was there anything you didn't enjoy? Did you like the combat? Did you like the puzzles? Was the adventure too long, too short, or about the right length? Their answers to these questions will help you become a better game master and potentially make adjustments going forward. The most important thing to remember is that D&D isn't about being perfect. You don't need to know every rule. You don't need to memorize the entire adventure. Just focus on having fun and building a story together. If you'd like to learn more about the Wilds of Amaranth Part I, Save the Dog Kingdom, there's a link in the description. Whether you're using this book or another published campaign, I'm sure your first session will be great. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps the channel.